morning, everyone. Thank you for listening to my presentation. Today, I will be talking about a pretty relevant subject, I think, to all of us. And I will be persuading that everyone should be supporting the federal legalization of cannabis. So in 1970, Congress passed the Comprehensive Drug Abuse Prevention and Control Act. And this was to combat prevalent drug use. And Richard Nixon, in his address, stated, "It provides for jurisdiction that we have not previously had. The jurisdiction of the Attorney General will go far beyond, for example, heroin. It will cover the new types of drugs, the barbiturates and the amphetamines that have become so common and that are even more dangerous because of their use and abuse. It also provides for a very forward-looking program for drug abuse." So that seems like a noble, thought, especially in the time and all the people that were listening to his address. But now we know that he wasn't such a noble man. But what about cannabis? In his whole speech, there's no reference or even mention of cannabis or marijuana as they were using it at the time. I think to understand the plant, we have to examine its history and the extensive relationship that human beings have had. So human beings have been cultivating cannabis for thousands of years, at least 12,000 years, all the way until when there were still glaciers and we were still kind of in the later form of the Ice Age. The cannabis plant evolved and kind of grew in Central Asia, where it evolved as distinctive properties. Now, people smoke cannabis today for the main ingredient, which is THC. And THC is a psychoactive substance that causes a high. And in defending their use, people might say that, humans actually have an endocannabinoid system. We have receptors that receive these THC molecules, so we were meant to smoke it. But this is not the case. We had no influence on the making of the plant. It was completely nature. And I'm sure from biology classes and chemistry classes, you guys know that life operates due to natural selection. So what caused the cannabis plant to develop its THC molecule? Researchers in Israel stated that the THC molecule in nature has two purposes. One was to refract the UV radiation that causes damage to a lot of plants. And two, the THC became psychoactive to deter animals from eating it. Cannabis throughout the ages became a really versatile plant over millions of years, and the humans discovered it. And the way that we discovered it was, we didn't discover the plant that we would be smoking today. We actually discovered a counterpart of cannabis called hemp. You may have heard of hemp, and you may have seen it in bottles of cosmetics and stuff like that. It's a really versatile cousin of cannabis that we use for making rope and paper. There was a big myth that people thought that the Declaration of Independence and the United States Constitution were written on hemp paper, but that is not the case. They were growing hemp, but those two were written on parchment. Now, according to ancientorigins.net, which is a really premier site for anything about ancient history, not just cannabis, they discovered that the first recorded use of marijuana as a medicinal drug occurred in 2737 BC by the Chinese Emperor Shen Nung. And he used to use it for his arthritis, and he had some brain function impairments that it helped him with. Now, the plant spread from China to Korea to Japan and then to India. Now, before it got to India, it was mainly just used as a tool. But in India, it gained a spiritual importance. It became a part of the Hinduism religion. They called it bhang, and they used it as a form of meditation. And they combined that with Buddhism, and it just became a really big part of both religions. Now, from India, it moved along the Silk Road through the Middle East and into Africa. In Egypt, every single mummy that we have discovered today has had traces of cannabis on their body. And not just hemp, they're talking about the flowers that we smoke today. So it was very much a big part of that ancient civilization. Now, there is a big trend that you guys should be noticing here. Wherever humans moved throughout the world, cannabis moved with it. So it was very much part of the human diaspora. They brought it with them because it was such a versatile plant, medicinal and for tools. The British Empire, we're going to fast forward a little bit ahead in history. The British Empire believed that the cannabis plant and hemp plant is so versatile that they actually mandated the cultivation of cannabis in the 13 original colonies. Every house in the colonies, American colonies, had to grow cannabis and hemp. So what happened? Like, why did the perception of cannabis change? Like, why is it a Schedule I drug, which is up there with heroin and methamphetamine? It turns out that the very thing that made it really popular made it its downfall. The human migration, that whole concept of human migration, it goes wherever humans went. So we're going to fast forward to the Mexican Revolution of 1910. Cannabis, and they call it marijuana, they used it a lot for the cultures and the traditions. And when they were escaping the revolution and coming into Texas and Louisiana in the South, they brought the plant with them. So cannabis became associated with the spread of Mexican immigrants. But at that time, Mexicans were calling it marijuana, but Americans were still using cannabis as a part of their tinctures and the oils and medicines. But the disconnect between fact and fear due to racism happened because of yellow journalism, which is like the over-exaggeration of facts. So American propaganda were like demonizing the plant. They called it marijuana, and they made a disconnect between marijuana and cannabis, the medicinal drug, and then fear the people that bring a drug. And then it wasn't just Mexicans that were party to the racism caused due to the plant. Fast forward more into the civil rights movement. Journalism used to pin it on African American men and say that it enabled them to solicit sex from white women. So they created an even more atmosphere of fear. And then again in 1970 it became a Schedule I drug due to that act. So you can see that cannabis prohibition has a direct link to racism. Now, moving on to some medical benefits, according to the American Medical Association, in 2012 they stated that marijuana does not impair lung function and can even increase lung capacity. Now we have seen a lot of studies where there's qualities that can impair the growth of cancer and even eradicate it completely. There's other uses for it like PTSD and glaucoma. So there's a lot of uses. It hasn't been up for research until the Obama administration legalized cannabis research in 2015. So we've only had about 2 years of studies, and those studies aren't even complete yet. So it does need to be researched more upon, and the way that we can research it is by legalizing it. And you must hear that like Colorado and Washington get a lot of state revenue due to the legalization, so it has a great economic benefit. And societal benefit, like if you legalize a drug, then the cartels and any other black markets won't be able to push it to you at, they won't have a reason to because it's legalized. You can go walk in next door and get it. There's a dispensary down the street from here. So the time for cannabis legalization is now. We have to legalize it, not just to get people high, but to understand the substances within and to help cure cancer, which, we could have the holy grail of of medicine right in front of us, but we're just not willing to do it because some people want it illegal. So I believe strictly that cannabis should be a legal entity, just like alcohol and tobacco, because it is very, very much less harmful to people and very, very beneficial, as our ancient history proves. Thank you so much.
All right, Eddie, what did you think?
Alright, well, I thought that your claim was pretty clear. You know, you want us to legalize cannabis and whatnot. There wasn't much of a preview. I found like you didn't kind of like build up to that point. You just kind of said like, this is what it's about. But you do, after that, you do kind of go into like a preview about the history of it and some things about Nixon said. And that was kind of like your preview. And I actually thought that was one of your best points in the speech. Like you kind of go on a chronological path, or kind of like a history lesson about cannabis and how each culture kind of valued it. I really like that. You have a lot of like support and evidence. You know, you reference Nixon in his address on his take on drug use, and you define like active ingredients in cannabis. I thought that was helpful. He lists like economic benefits, you know, tax revenue that helps the government, and it could possibly like destabilize cartels and whatnot. I thought you made pretty good eye contact with the audience. You were like actively looking at us back and forth. That was really good, helped connect with the audience. You did pace a little toward the beginning, like you were walking a little bit back and forth, but you kind of stopped that toward the end. So that, if anything, that was like probably your biggest problem with the speech. Overall, I thought it was pretty good and I liked it.
All right. Yeah, there's a greeting and an immediate identification of the topic, but there's not really any attention device, and there's not a lot of lead into the subject. There's no preview of what the structure is going to be, and so I'm not exactly sure how it's all going to end up. It turns into about a 7-minute history lesson about marijuana, which is an interesting, informative speech, but which doesn't really build a very effective, persuasive presentation. When you finally get to the point where you're making an argument for legalization toward the end of the speech, the information that you cite is cryptic at best. I don't think you usually give a source citation on it. You start off by saying, well, there aren't any harmful effects. Then you assert a whole inventory of possible medical benefits without citing any information to support that. You say the only way that we can study it is to legalize it completely, but you also said that the Obama administration has legalized it for research purposes just 2 years ago, so why it is we need to legalize it completely before we know what the hell is going on seems a little bit strange. We got a lot of assertions about tax benefits and about the impact on cartels and organized crime, but without any proof on any of those things. I think that that's problematic. Presentation, I think, is pretty effective. You have good variety in your voice, excellent audience contact, and I think you have a lot of emphasis when you're speaking. Your gestures are, you do have that page in your hand, so you have to gesture with the page in your hand, and I know you've got a little bit of a limitation being able to use both, although we did want to try and get the notes out of your hand. Got slightly nervous feet. I think you need to plant yourself a little bit more. It's not so much that you were wandering, it's just that you can see the energy levels coming out, and if the moves were more deliberate, they would be more meaningful and useful for the presentation. But it wasn't something that was a huge drawback, because like I said, I think you do a very good job talking to the audience and engaging. The problem that I have with most of the speech is that there's a lot of, like I said, a review of history, so almost 2/3 of the speech is really an informative presentation, and you don't get into the argumentative point until the end, and that's the part that misses most of the research that is needed. All right, thank you.